Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, our first episode of 2022.
Yes, sir.
That's 2020 squared, 2020 2.0. I don't know if that means it'll be a repeat or if we'll get an upgrade, but we're here. We made it through another year. What'd you do for the new year?
I went home, and every time I go home, I feel like, conservative propaganda hits my life, and got to realize I'm from the rural Texas. Do you know Governor Abbott was born in Wichita Falls?
Oh, I didn't know that.
That explains the city that I grew up in. But no, man. I feel like 2021 went out like, I feel like good old Betty White
and John Madden.
Yeah, I feel like that was an example of this is the most happiest lady ever, who left this beautiful this world right at the end of the year of the worst kind of year for our generation.
Yeah,
from a growth side.
Yeah, hopefully she took it all with her.
Yeah, she said, "Let me take all this bad stuff and bring it to the grave, so we could sprout up new beginnings." How was your New Year's?
It was fine. We didn't do anything.
Yeah, you started sending me articles at 8 in the morning. I'm like, you definitely went to bed before midnight.
I made it to East Coast midnight, but that was close enough. 11:15, it was okay, cool. We saw the New York ball drop.
Were you aware of? Did you ever watch the Central Time New Year's show, the Nashville one? Oh man, I was just really blown away. That's actually something we haven't I'm loving that we're freestyling this, but it brings up so the New Year's was what you were watching, the New York one, but then there was at least local television in Wichita Falls was Miami,
okay,
which was ran by Miley Cyrus. And,
I did. We turned that one on for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Yeah.
And this is my parents just have satellite, or the cable, the 20 channels. So on the 30 channels where you don't get options, you only got Miami.
Okay.
And then the Central Time was a Nashville one. And it was the first time Nashville had their New Year's at a national scale.
Gotcha.
But it was country AF the whole time. So we were watching the Miami one all the way up until it.
Mm-hmm.
But then now I'm sitting here for an hour watching the Nashville one, and then the Dallas one, and then it's just crazy. The Dallas one's there, but then you're Dallas is so much bigger than Nashville. But you could just tell I'm why does Nashville get this? I was watching the three places. I think people were oh, we should go to Miami one day. Oh, we should go to Nashville. But then you look at the local one and you're just why does Dallas not get to do the Central one? That's what I was just thinking. I was why don't we get to do a big Central bash?
That's a good point. I mean, it is other than Houston, it's the biggest area in the Central Time Zone.
Yeah, we should be able to do the big bash. For the country.
I feel you. Nashville feels a little more party time though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see that on CNN? They, at midnight when they're just walking around asking people what are your New Year's resolutions, and this is on national CNN. Guy walks up to this lady and he's like, "Do you have any New Year's resolutions?" She goes, "No more broke dick." And he pulls off his headphones. He's like, "What'd you say?" And she repeats it. He's like, "What? And she's like, "I'm not having sex with broke dudes anymore."
That's so
and it's
crazy.
live, so they can't edit it out or anything.
That's
so
crazy.
funny.
That's the dad saying, "Let's go, Brandon," to the Bidens on Christmas.
Yeah, Joe handled that well. I thought that was funny.
No, literally, the longest discussion in my household was they were trying to say that Joe Biden lost it and he didn't know what the person was talking about, and he was just let's go, Brandon, and not knowing. I was
that's the Fox News spin on it.
Yeah, and I'm just are you guys kidding? It was just normal. It's just, and then it's just.
Also, what a terrible dad!
yeah.
What once in a lifetime opportunity for your kid to talk to the president of the United States, and you're gonna ruin it by saying that.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You got to be a better parent than that.
And everyone was like, Biden, which, again, Biden is old, so I'm not saying he's not fast.
Yeah, yeah.
But in this moment, he was fine. Like, even before that point, he reminded Jill that they do have a grandson named Hunter. Like, he's like, yeah, our grandson's name's Hunter. And like, and Jill's like, oh, I was thinking of Bo. And then it's like, but he was like correcting her.
Yeah.
And then that incident happened. He was like, you got kids on there. You're like, yeah, you're right. Let's go, Brandon. Like,
yeah.
Well
like,
done.
what do you expect him to say? Like, hey, asshole, shut up. Like, yeah. Ridiculous.
That was my family discussion in Wichita Falls. How Joe Biden doesn't know what Let's Go Brandon is. And I was like, okay.
Well, and now we have had like a 70-degree temperature drop in one day.
Yes.
I usually walk over here, and it's it's like a mile and a half. Like, it's a nice walk, but that was not happening today.
Yeah, no, did it snow here? There's like in Wichita Falls, I woke up with snow.
Yeah, it didn't snow here, but I definitely saw that like the area was getting it. I just think it's crazy. Like, we're in this place where, I mean, I've lived here for 10 winters now. It freezes every year, but we act like this is some anomaly. Like, how long are we going to stick our heads in the sand and act like this doesn't happen every year? And it's just random whether or not there's precipitation involved with it too. But like,
and I feel
we act like this doesn't happen, and it does every single year. So I just feel like North Texas is like preparing to go to battle every time it's going to get below freezing. And it's like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, it's cold. We, run our faucets, put some things on our pipes.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but the kicker though, is I do feel like it being that it was when the storm came during New Year's, I guess you would just feel like you think we would have been more prepared, or like more signage and communication from the city to like, yeah. But again, I also feel like this was a very slow New Year's because people just stayed home.
Yeah.
Omicron, and people are just not. Every single person I know got COVID. Everyone, like every time I look at my Instagram, everyone has COVID. So maybe people were just staying at home, so they didn't think it was that big of a deal to tell people to be safe. But
yeah, because we wouldn't be out anyways.
Yeah, it was a lot of snow in
really
Wichita Falls. Well, like a lot of snow in the sense of like, I could get to the ground and make you a snowball. Okay. It would be a puny snowball, but I could and like throw a snowball at you.
Yeah.
Like, it was that much snow. So, but yeah.
It's like maybe this is a sign to come of the winter that's finally here.
I had a lot of jackets I wanted to wear, so this is good.
It's like, about time.
I wore 4 jackets today because I don't know if it's going to be cold again. Yeah. So I'm just like, let me get all my drip done through. Here. Yeah. But let's go ahead and dive in some stories. Welcome to, obviously, the 817 podcast, where we get to hang out with you lovely people in the beautiful city of Fort Worth, Texas. This is the first episode. As usually over the holidays, journalists need breaks as well. They need rest and time with family. So it was a slow news week. But Jimmy, do you want to start with the state level laws that came into place that we all might need to be aware about in Texas?
Yeah, so Greg Abbott has called 100 special sessions this year. Anytime Don Huffines tweets that there's something he doesn't like, Greg Abbott calls a special session to make our legislators take care of it. And finally, a number of those laws are coming into effect as of January 1. If just like, I don't, the ones that start Telegram published are, there's a number of random things. Under Texas law, landlords don't have to tell you if you are a renter that the place you're staying is likely to flood. That's changing. Now landlords have to disclose that a property's in a floodplain or been damaged by flooding in the past. That seems like a positive thing. A big one, starting January 18th, athletes at public schools will be required to compete on teams that correspond with the sex listed on their birth certificate. There's obviously a big one that has just been like a wild goose chase of scare tactics and everything that transgender student athletes are going to destroy sports and youth as we know it. So that was made a big priority by conservative lawmakers this year.
This voter approval for police budget cuts is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we already vote we vote for our city council. Like, we have already said that we trust them to create a budget, and now we're saying that we have to vote again even if we wanted to decrease the police budget by $5, like, goes to a vote.
Yeah.
Goes to a public vote. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, like, it's municipalities in Tarrant County will soon be required to gain voter approval before reducing their law enforcement budgets. This will apply to the 71 police departments in the county. So, like, yeah, it's just crazy because it's smart for them because the only people who are going to go out and vote when this comes are police officers and their families.
Right.
Like, nobody's actually going to go to the poll.
Right.
Like, you won't care that much.
Yeah. It's just this, like, fear-mongering about how terrible crime is, and it's ridiculous. So that is and, like, let's be honest, like, police budgets aren't decreasing. Like, we talk about, like, social awakening in the wake of George Floyd, but, like, it didn't change anything. It didn't change anything on a national level where we're still seeing, like, the military budget being given a surplus over what they asked, whereas we can't pass Build Back Better because who knows? Because Joe Manchin and the Republicans think that helping people sucks. So is something like this ever even going to come up? I highly doubt it. There are too many wealthy hands in the pot of weapons and defense for these budget cuts to happen in the current state of America. But this just adds another layer to discouraging it. Something might be of interest: tax breaks for homes in historic districts. So Fort Worth's historic districts are Butler Place, Central Handley, 8th Ave, Elizabeth Boulevard, Fairmount Southside, Grand Avenue, Luda May, Oakhurst, Cotton Belt Railroad, and Grapevine Commercial. A new law could help homeowners of historic properties afford to keep them. Under the law, an appraiser who is determining the market value of a home located in a historic district has to consider any restriction on the homeowner's ability to alter, improve, or repair the property. Typically, you're not allowed to do so under preservation guidelines. Advocates say the current law places homeowners in historic districts at a disadvantage because homeowners in surrounding areas are able to make improvements that drive up their property's market value. Basically, if you're selling a home in Fairmount now, an appraiser that comes out has to take into consideration that maybe you weren't allowed to make whatever improvement, replace whatever siding, whatever it is, and potentially inflate the value of your home accordingly. So who knows what, like, the practicality of that will look like. I feel like you would have a really tough time challenging that in any sort of, like, court setting, but you at least have a leg to stand on that, hey, my home's being deflated in value because I couldn't do this because of the district that I'm in. Homestead exemption, you can now get a homestead exemption in the same year you buy your home instead of having to wait until the following year. Should save you, honestly, pretty significantly on property taxes in the first year, which I didn't know. It also says in this that Texas has the 6th highest property taxes of any state in the country, which is kind of insane.
But we do know state income tax.
Veterans are getting more benefits, full disability compensation, entitled to property tax exemption. So a number of things that have, like, a positive effect on people mixed in with the garbage like bans on transgender athletes that they've been trying to slide through forever. Another thing we wanted to hit on this week was final design was okayed for the housing complex in Fort Worth Stop 6. We talked about this a while ago, that the projects there were demolished to make way for trying to transform that area. It's great that, there's progress being made. I just look at the picture of this and I'm like, man, like it's another apartment complex. Like, why can't we make stuff that looks cool? Yeah. Like, is it too much to ask to have cool architecture anywhere? Like, all these apartment complexes just look the exact same in the same style. And like, let's just have something cool. Let's have something fun to look at.
Yep.
So there's the redevelopment was seeded with a $35 million grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Phase 1 broke ground September 16th. Crews are expected to break down on this project in June, with construction scheduled to wrap up at the end of 2023. So like, positive thing for the community. I just like saw the drawing and I was like, I don't know how much you paid the architect for that facade, but I could do that for you for significantly less.
Yeah, it's it kind of looks like, I don't know if you have parents who have like very neutral color in their house. Like, everything in my mom's house is brown. It's kind of like that.
Yeah,
it's like everything's brown. Let's just make it brown. Tan walls, brown furniture, brown rugs.
That's just how we're doing it.
But our generation's about gray. Everything's gray. I'm like, all right, team, yell. The next story, which I don't have up in front of me, it's more of like super cool, but like, why did it take national news to make happen? We have the best Tetris players in the country, or is it the world?
The world.
The world.
The two best Tetris players in the world are a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old brothers. Yeah, I mean, they're getting down on Twitch. They're in the arcade. Like, these guys have invented like a whole new style of playing Tetris.
Yeah.
Crazy. So cool.
And they live in Fort Worth. And it took the New York Times to tell us all.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the headline and I was like, oh, Fort Worth. Like, wow, that's crazy. And I click on it. I'm like, how have I never heard of these guys?
Yeah.
How has nobody
featured,
highlighted these people?
Yeah,
super cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. And, someone needs to, invest in them for the next idea.
Yeah.
They're going to save our economy.
Yeah. New York Times from December 28th, titled "A New Generation Stacks Up Championships in an Old Game, Tetris." Yeah, these two guys are just
brothers
hanging out, inventing a new style of how you play Tetris. I mean, I'm sure if it's,
you got two prodigies.
Yeah,
redefining how to play a game.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, so this guy, it kind of all came about starting in 2018. This guy who was a star of a documentary about Tetris, like Tetris Master, World Master, went to the World Championships and lost to a 16-year-old who, like, on YouTube, they had like come together and come up with this different way of playing Tetris. The videos on YouTube, and since then, this like hyper tapping method has become the way that you dominate Tetris. I don't know another way to say it. Yeah, these two brothers are killing the game. The younger one won first place at the 2020 Tetris World Championships.
It's so crazy how he holds I'm watching the video.
Yeah.
So crazy how he holds the controller.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome.
It almost like he's like typing on a keyboard.
Yeah. I would love to know what other like super cool things like this are happening in Fort Worth that we're missing out on. Because this is awesome.
Because usually when New York Times has Fort Worth in the store in the paper, it's something we don't want to see. Statues in Weatherford and all these racist people running around with Confederate flags. And like, there's Fort Worth in the national light. Now we got some kids making it happen. Kudos, you guys. Super inspiring. All right, so the big story is, last week we talked about like land and real estate and what is the city doing around that. This is going to be around infrastructure and specifically the road dilemma in Fort Worth. So if you live out of the loop, you live in, the suburbs of Fort Worth, you probably have a lot of stress where roads are not being developed fast enough and there's traffic and, not enough space to get to where you're trying to go quickly. But if you live in a older neighborhood, you also have roads and potholes and things you want fixed. So what's interesting about this dilemma here is that you're seeing it in the newspaper. Both we saw in KERA news, and then you also saw it in the Fort Worth report. But these parties fighting for where do we fund money for Fort Worth roads. So Fort Worth city staff is recommending a $500 million bond that's set to go before voters next year, which will be increased by $60 million, and the bulk of the additional money will be spent on streets. But the amount represents 18% of the estimated cost of street projects staff identified that need funding. Specifically, there's an additional 11 necessary street projects estimated to cost about $324 million, but city staff said most will have to be covered by Tarrant County, the state or federal government, or wait until the city's 2026 bond. So a lot of the drama around streets in Fort Worth is if we don't get these projects in 2022, we got to wait a long time. And waiting a long time, we could be a whole different city in 4 years, right? So during a meeting earlier this month, Councilman Kerry Moon pushed city staff to add street projects that are north of Loop 820 to the city's 2022 budget. He, quote, says, there are teenagers who have died in head-on collisions on these county roads, so it's more than just dealing with congestion and being late to and from work. We find it interesting that Kerry Moon cares about deaths on roads now, but he wants to drive drunk. Anyways, we keep going. If the new $560 million bond passes in May, the city should incentivize contractors to complete these street projects as soon as possible. Also, Leonard Firestone. So there's a map here, and the map just kind of shows what streets that they're advocating for in Fort Worth, the 11 projects. And these are, Jimmy, you saw the map. It's far away.
Yeah, we're looking side by side of where those roads are relative to Fort Worth versus where Plano is relative to Dallas.
Yeah.
And the roads that we're talking about are in the equivalent of South Plano.
Yeah.
Which that's insane to think about how thin we're trying to stretch Fort Worth. And also, we just passed a $400 million transportation bond.
Yep.
100% of it for roads. How much money are we going to continue putting into roads?
Yep.
And not even care to touch on every other way that people can get around. It's another, let's bury our head in the sand and pretend that people can't use public transportation or bike or walk. And let's just keep going after our roads.
Yeah, and think about that. Again, we as the pod, we're the biggest advocates of the biggest problem with Fort Worth is we call a lot of parts of Texas Fort Worth that just should not be called Fort Worth. And this is South, asking Dallas to fund a road in South Plano.
Or Lancaster. We look the other direction, and south, we're funding a road that would be in Lancaster,
DeSoto.
Texas.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the problem is I don't think that it has to go to public vote to annex areas onto Fort Worth. That's something that city council just does. How about instead of having to have public vote on reducing police budgets. We have a public vote on whether or not we keep adding parts onto this city and annexing land, because that's something that legitimately affects the way that our tax dollars are spent and how the city budget operates.
Yeah.
It's crazy to just like look at this map and actually put into perspective. Like, we're talking about repairing roads in Plano or Lancaster.
Yeah.
And for Fort Worth, that's just part of the city.
Yeah. It's crazy. And you're talking about we're going to invest $500 million into infrastructure here in Fort Worth around roads and transportation. And so the other half of the story is KERA. They did a story talking about how in Fort Worth from 2015 to 2019, most of the car crashes that seriously injured or killed people happen in communities of colors, the City Review found. But the kicker here is that the city's Transportation and Public Work Department crunched data from more than 88,000 crashes from 2015 to 2019 and identified a high injury network, stretches of roads where concentrations of people have been killed or seriously hurt in crashes. Almost all high injury network locations are in or next to communities of color, specifically neighborhoods where at least 75% of the residents are people of color. Tanya Brooks, the assistant director at Transportation Public Works, blames the lack of sidewalks and streetlights. But if you go further in the story, here's the data point that that we want to hit here is that since 2007, Fort Worth has funded approximately 20% of the street construction and reconstruction need. Only 10% of the estimated annual operating need for the transit system. We've only funded 10% of the estimated annual operating need for the transit system, less than 10% of the sidewalk need, and roughly 1% of the bike infrastructure need. This is, what the Transportation Public Work Group is talking about. They're talking about a movement called the Vision Zero movement. And Brooks, the lady I mentioned earlier, is asking for $5 million in this 2022 bond proposal to work towards the goal of chipping away these inequities in our road infrastructures and providing streetlights and sidewalks that are backlogged today. So that's in the city. But our boy, not our boy, but a regular on the pod, Carrie Moon, wants to fund a road in South Plano.
With the same
dollars
logic as saying that this is where kids are getting killed. Which, like, if that's happening up there, like, yeah, that also sucks. But KRA's putting the numbers in front of you of where these accidents and these injuries and deaths are legitimately happening. And it's not all the way up there. It's in the city, in communities of color, and we're just sort of batting an eye at it. And, like, all of those numbers are bad, right? Like, only hitting 20% of road need, like, that's bad. But that's more than double transit need. That's significantly more.
Double sidewalk need.
Yeah, even more than double sidewalk need. And 20x on bike lanes. Yeah. Like, that's insane that we just keep spinning our wheels doing the same thing. And I mean, like, you see it there are not good sidewalks in the city. Like, a little bit around downtown has a solid sidewalk network now. They're building that bike lane on West 7th, which has just kind of been a nightmare traffic wise, and the logistics of where the lanes are gonna go now also seems a little interesting. But outside of that area, like, you can't walk around our neighborhood. You can't do a direct path around really like any neighborhood in Fort Worth and have consistent sidewalks the whole way, except for maybe Fairmount and Ryan Place.
Yeah.
And then you just look at the sidewalks and they're cracked, jagged. Some of them are sticking out of the ground. Like, we're just so far behind on this stuff, and it doesn't feel like there's any urgency to catch up. Yeah.
And I mean, they the character flaw of Councilman Moon here, though, to who out of, like, where do you go in your own brain to be like, I'm the person who's going to call out teenagers dying on roads? Like that is one, like, to me is like, you're going to try to hit, you're being the politician and you're going to try to hit, which there are teenagers who have died in head-on collisions on these county roads. So it's more than just dealing with congestion and being late to and from work. Like, you're not the guy to be saying that quote. Like, you don't care about that.
Yeah.
Your actions show you don't care about safety on roads.
Yeah.
Like, so, like, I'm just blown away that you don't have the empathy logic to realize, yeah, this is not my place to say this.
Right.
Like, that is just crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, and it's, anyway, so we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see if this is a story where these get passed and we just never know because no one writes another story about it.
Yeah.
And, he gets his South Plano road.
Yeah.
And then the world keeps being a messed up place. And I mean, I don't feel bad at the same time for if you move to a new housing development and you kind of know, like, if you're that afraid to live around black and brown people, you're all crunching a place, like, you kind of know it's going to happen when there's one road with a stop sign. Like you got to know that
it's pretty apparent that like you're moving into new developed land.
Yeah.
Like you're stepping into a bunch of houses and cars that weren't on this area before.
Yeah.
Like it's going to
2 years from now.
Yeah. Like it's going to feel crowded. Well, and that brought me to, Luke Ranker, former Star Telegram, reporter, was doing like a recap of a lot of his favorite stories of the last year and mentioned the one about the advancing East Lancaster, which came out in like June, July, talking about this rapid bus system that was proposed for East Lancaster, and never really heard anything about it again. And so, like, I started looking. Something was supposed to happen by December. We may have just missed it, but it doesn't seem like anything has happened. And it's just things like this that are new, not even new solutions, because so many cities have done this. Like, it's not a creative solution. It's just copying and pasting something that has worked elsewhere, are just kind of getting looked over, passed by. I mean, according to the Advancing East Lancaster website, plan completion was supposed to be done by December 2021. Final plan recommendation looks like it was supposed to be maybe mid-October. I don't know if the public meetings ever really happened. And this was an exciting potential thing that we were looking at for making this area more accessible and equitable. And it's just kind of like disappeared. Like, it hasn't shown up at city council meetings. So, maybe it comes back and has been going on this whole time, and there's just been nothing reported on it. But if our focus and goal is just building new roads and updating roads, we're gonna be left in the past.
But here's the other crazy thing about it is that the same people who are asking for roads to be built in their suburbs are the people who don't vote for taxes and budgets.
Yeah.
It's the same people, like, we're conservative, staunch conservative, fiscally conservative, but then, hey, work on my roads though.
Right. Right. Exactly. We don't want to pay for it.
We don't want to pay for infrastructure.
Yeah.
We don't want to pay for stuff. But hey, go work on my roads.
Yeah, come fix my potholes. Yeah, make my public school the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but hey, we're going to go ahead and, I'm going to put this story because the map is just cool in here. Like, just to see the map where it shows a road that Fort Worth would fund that is on the same, latitude as Plano. It's pretty just neat to see, and just kind of seeing like some of the complex of a city like Fort Worth that sprawls out so far.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and move into wins and losses. And,
I'll start with my loss. So the Fort Worth Report has been doing this Profiles in Leadership series, which I've enjoyed the vast majority of them. I think it's really cool to uncover these stories and people who maybe don't get the recognition that they deserve as young leaders in the city. But they published one this week on Carlos Tercios, and I mean, these really are puff pieces meant to, really highlight the person's qualities. But you get like 25 paragraphs into this story on Carlos, and you read that this man is a Back the Blue March organizer and is organizing protests and parents to get Fort Worth ISD superintendent removed and remove critical race theory from Fort Worth ISD. Why are we out here peddling conspiracy theories and super far right fear-based ideologies and taking the people that advocate for those and puffing them up as doing good things in the city? Like, this is not a good thing. And we're just casually dropping that in there like, oh yeah, this is cool, look at what this guy's doing. Like, this guy's politically active. He's done a lot by age 20 to get involved. But like, this guy is volunteering for the Trump campaign.
Little baby Shapiro up in here.
Yeah, like, come on. We don't, like, this is not the type of advocate that we need to be puffing up as a leader in Fort Worth.
So tell me what happened. You said people called out Chris for it, and like the head editor of the paper. And what's the dynamic? What are people saying?
Yeah, I mean, just saying like, how, like, who is this? Why is this the person that we're advocating for in the city? And he just really kept deflecting, wouldn't engage with it. Wanted to say that, like, we can't paint with such broad strokes.
Yeah.
I challenged him and said, like, he wanted to say this person has also been involved with leading groups of people that have made violent death threats towards Latina members of the community. And he was trying to say, like, why are we going to paint, is a leader responsible for everyone that joins the movement? Like, yeah, the CEO is responsible for a company, the pastor's responsible for the church, the cult leader is responsible for the actions of the cult. Like, yes. And he tried to say, like, well, I would expect a leader to apologize and take responsibility. Somebody else said, did he? And obviously never got a response to that because we know the answer to it. But this just seems like a really misplaced opportunity to highlight somebody who is actually doing good things in the city versus somebody who is campaigning to get critical race theory, something that doesn't exist in grade schools, removed from grade schools, trying to censor the libraries of kids. Like,
we're going to see this kid run for a local election.
100%. I'm sure
Latino, he would be a perfect little candidate one day.
Like, yeah, I mean, I was like, this is crazy. We're highlighting this guy who's like invited to the Republican convention because of his work on the Trump campaign. It's like, yeah, the Trump campaign that is literally being indicted for causing an insurrection against the United States of America. Like, we can
but
there are people in the city doing better work than this.
And odds are, they're not odds, like, make an assumption, right? It's a nonprofit, non-biased site, but you have to get the community to support your work. And 95% of the times, and why most people hate journalism, like who are not democratic or progressive, is that it always feels like it leans, I guess blue or progressive. And so I get the need to I can't imagine, they did one on me, right? And I'm over here like, you got to take it from them. You like, if you're black and brown, you got to go take it from these people. And, these old Fort Worthians are probably reading, you let some radical kid on, and so now let's make we got to make this, equitable. Like every person y'all highlight is like this crazy liberal. So let's throw on one of these guys. But they just went too far. They went too far and picked, a guy who's not doing good. There are good conservatives doing good work in Fort Worth. But, not saying things that harm Latinos in Fort Worth.
Yeah. So that's my loss. We could have done a lot better than this.
Yeah. We'll see this kid's future.
And take responsibility for maybe this wasn't the best call. I don't know the best way around that, but just deflecting and saying that we're not going to engage on this is not the way to handle it either.
My loss is, Sam Kalimbahin from just a journalist that we've known for a while in Fort Worth, who's always done great work, is no longer at the Fort Worth Magazine. I think that is, this is the tough thing about journalism. It's something that takes a lot of work, a lot of talent, and you can only go so far. And this is, look, Luke Ranker's gone, switch his career. This is a common thing where we just can't, acknowledge and support and sustain high quality journalism. So that's my loss. And also just a win for all the hard work she did to be a voice for the city and keeping all of us informed.
Yeah. I mean, she was churning out content for Fort Worth Magazine.
Yeah.
The vast majority of their online content was coming through Sam. And she's a staunch supporter of local and small businesses in the city.
Yeah.
So excited for her to have a career that is more financially stable, but it is definitely a loss to have a major publication lose its major contributor like that.
Yeah.
My win, and this is more of a national and international look at COVID and Omicron. I mean, there are a ton of cases right now, but when we look internationally, especially at South Africa, who is on 3 consecutive weeks of declining Omicron cases, their peak hospitalizations and deaths were still significantly lower than their Delta peak. There's a New York Times article this week about some studies that have shown that Omicron, it doesn't attack your lungs the same way that Delta and previous strains of COVID have. It kind of is starting to seem like Omicron could be the potential COVID endgame where it turns into more like a seasonal flu. Obviously, there's still risk involved, it's affecting vaccinated people significantly less than unvaccinated people, especially boosted people. Even more so, there's still a lot of value in getting vaccinated, but having this wave, although case-wise is insanely intense, and like you said, it feels like everybody is getting it. And so that I'd do understand and feel some of the fear in that. It seems like this could be a potential just wave where it's giving us more time to catch up on longer term vaccines and treatments and everything of the sort. So while it while we are in the thick of it right now, and like, I mean, you can't even get an at-home test. Like, rapid testing appointments are hard to come by. Like, I think end of January, we're going to be looking at this as hopefully the end of this like 2-year period of where this has dominated society. So that's my hope. I feel like there's been a lot of positive news and trends globally, and in the studies being done about Omicron. So I'll say that that's my win, seeing those things, and hopefully it continues that trend. Although, like, we're still going to be seeing a lot of cases and hospitalizations, especially in an area like ours that remains significantly under-vaccinated.
Yeah. I think you're right. We're on the other side. You know, I don't have a win. I can't think of one. Why you were eloquently sharing the other side of the row. I just, I'm going to think about another loss. My other loss, because you triggered it when you said 2-year stint. We were talking about it off the pod, is how, we started this podcast post-COVID, but also post a racial awakening for people to become more conscious about Black and brown people, right? We lost George Floyd movement has data shown more people got more interested in race. Buying books about race, supporting Black businesses. And I guess where I feel like it's a loss is that even though we're, like you said, we're at the end of COVID, I feel like we're at the end of people caring about that again. It just feels like everyone's going back. And I'm noticing it in Fort Worth because I met as a newer Fort Worthian and someone who, really kept his mouth shut or didn't, really advocate for Fort Worth, 2 years ago. I'm noticing like, oh wow, everyone's like, man, people are going back to their normal selves. Your dollars are going back to your normal white places. Your campaigns and your marketing. You were only inclusive because of George Floyd, and now I realize it and I see it. And that's my loss.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a consistent theme across social awakenings in history. And I mean, hopefully we can buck the trend in some ways and have
we went long. This was a long one.
Yeah, we have taken some significant
Absolutely.
steps forward, but at the same time, like, I see that too.
Yeah. Well, hey, this was a good pod. I had a good time. We had you back in the studio. It's been a while since
I mean, this is the first time that we've seen each other in the flesh, and like, I mean, maybe the longest like gap that we've had since we started.
Yeah, because we had to do Zooms.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you guys for listening to the 817 pod. Really excited to have a good year ahead of us. A lot of exciting things happening in Fort Worth. Continues to grow. And you all continue to challenge us every day to provide high quality content, strong, fresh perspectives. And, we really enjoy doing this with all of you. So have a good rest of the week.
Yeah. Happy 2022. Stay warm, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap.